we are very pleased to welcome our CPH Banque member coming from Belgium. And we have organized this session with them on a special topic, AI and fraud detection. We believe that it's recurrent all over the world, but also in all sectors. So indeed, the fraud schemes have evolved really faster than the traditional rules, and CPH Banque will share with us today how they have explored the fraud firewall approach. So we believe that it's also an inspiring example on how cooperative banks can innovate and still, as ever, try to maintain their values and the trust and responsibility towards the client and members. So with this, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Pierre Rion, who will guide us through the main findings. As I heard just before preparing this part, he is actually the intellect of this approach. We are curious to hear how this concept has made its proof. So Pierre, thank you for sharing the lesson learned about your deployments, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valeria. You hear me well? All right, okay. Good afternoon, yes, everyone. And I would say good morning for the colleagues from South America. My name is Pierre Rion, and I'll be very pleased to animate this webinar in the name of CPH Banque, of which I'm a non-executive board member since more than 12 years now. We have chosen today to cover the principle of fraud detection using AI, a method that was successfully tested at the bank a few months ago, during last summer, in fact. Till then, we had been using manual scoring based on 20, 25, 26 questions, I think. But beginning of this year, the management decided to investigate a proof of concept, let's name it a PoC. Before jumping in the slide, I must tell you that I did consider that most of the audience is not very familiar with machine learning and AI techniques. So I do apologize for those who are. They could be a bit bored with some basics aspect of that presentation. Sorry about that. I've chosen to first take you through a step-by-step approach, a bit didactically, in order to explain how such a system may be built. By this, I mean how we collected, how we prepared the data, how we trained the models, how each iteration led to, let's say, stronger, more precise fraud detection. Okay, you see my slide. Okay. So my presentation is structured in two parts. First, the general method of fraud detection with machine learning. And for this, I use simple examples. And in the second part, I will cover the specific case of CPH Banque, but then with real data. The goal of the PoC was not just to check how to detect fraud, but to do it smartly. By this, I mean limiting false positive, but keeping the system transparent and also explainable, which is always a concern for authorities. Another comment about fraud detection system is that one of the challenge is to find the right balance. I mean, if you are too strict by detecting fraud, you will block too many right transactions and probably will frustrate the honest customers. But if you're too lax, on the opposite, you will let real fraud slip through and you will expose the bank to losses, which is for sure not the purpose. Okay, let's go through the... Okay, I will switch off the camera for the bandwidth. Okay, let's go now into the subject with imaginated examples. Everything obviously starts with data. We must learn the system from the past. to distinguish normal transaction from fraudulent one. This is the principle of machine learning. Machine learning, in fact, is like teaching a young child to recognize, for example, fruits. You don't explain him all the rules. You just show the child hundreds of pictures of apples and oranges, and you will teach him to recognize them. After seeing enough examples, the child learns by himself to recognize and to tell which is which. That's exactly what a machine learning model does. It looks at past example. In our case, it will be past transaction, and it will learn to recognize patterns that separate normal payments from fraudulent ones. Of course, the quality of the model depends directly on the quality of the data you feed it. Amongst the transaction, only a very small fraction, fortunately, much less than a fraction of percent, are fraudulent. So our objective is clear. We have to make sure that the data set is representative and clean enough for the model to learn. To learn what? To learn what normal is and what fraudulent really mean. And to achieve this, we will collect anonymized, for obvious reason, GDPR is important, and we will prepare all transactions, including information like you see on the upper right of the screen, such as the amount, the country, the channel used, the merchant type, and a very important one, which is the customer habits. But I'll come back later on this point. Once we have the raw data, we need to make it meaningful and only keep the relevant variables. So we will also clean the data by removing duplicates, by correcting impossible values, like negative amounts, and eventually we will fill in missing data. I want to say that the better your variables are, the more the model can see reality clearly. Needless to say that poor data would lead to poor prediction. Data specialists usually use the word cleansing instead of cleaning. As already mentioned, in real life, fraud is rare. I mean that out of 10,000 transactions, we should have probably less than one transaction which is fraudulent. So should we train the model directly on all real transactions with this proportion? It will simply learn the system to always deduct that there is no fraud, and it will then appear to be a wonderful world with 99% detection accuracy, which is not what we want, of course. Think again as the teaching the child to recognize apples from oranges. If you show him only apples, he'll think everything which is round is an apple. And that's why we need to artificially rebalance the samples. And to achieve this, either we will oversample the fraud cases by replicating them, or either we will undersample the normal ones so that we get, for example, 5,000 frauds and 5,000 good payments to train on. This way, the future model will pay equal attention to both sides. Here you can see what the raw data looks like. Each row is a transaction. We have the amount, the time, the origin country, the channel, the merchant type, and whether it was a fraud or not. Nothing extraordinary here, just numbers and labels. But hidden inside this data, we have kind of patterns. I mean, transactions made at night from unusual countries and with or big amounts in risky merchant categories. You can see one transaction and at 2:17 in the morning during night from Russia for electronic matters, which is a typical suspicious case. This was the first step of our learning process. Step 2, we have then cleaned the raw data. We'll now make them smarter. This important step is named feature engineering. It means transforming basic data into new, more meaningful variables that will reveal hidden fraud patterns. For example, instead of just looking at the transaction amount, we will compare it with what's usual for that customer. For instance, what's their average amount in the past week or months. If a customer who normally spends, let's say, 80 euro, suddenly sends more than 2,000 euro at 2 o'clock during the night to a new merchant abroad, that's clearly suspicious. Some of these enriched variables are behavioral or temporal indicators. How often someone pays in the last 24 hours. A suspicious speed between two transactions. Imagine a transaction done at Brussels at 10 o'clock and at Tokyo at 10:30, half an hour later. That's clearly physically impossible. Another behavioral is include things like the average usual amount over the past 7 or last 30 days. These new variables help the model to see not just what happened, but whether it makes sense in the context of that customer's usual behavior. That's what allows us to spot invisible signal of fraud. Fraud is for sure not only about behavior, right? It's also about context. For instance, the situation of the payment, a merchant type of electronic devices or jewelry is for sure more exposed than a merchant of grocery. We will also analyze the channel amount consistency. I mean, a large payment made through a mobile might be suspicious, while the same amount through a branch is probably fine. We will also check if it's a new beneficiary. Is it the first time that a customer pays a certain merchant? All these contextual clues make the model more realistic. By this, I mean it learns not from numbers, but also from human-like situation. On this slide, you can see how raw data become enriched intelligence. Remember at the beginning with the simple information from Russia, after transformation, the model will see a completely different picture. It knows that the customer usually spent 80 euro, so this payment is over 30 times higher than a normal payment with a huge deviation. It also happens at night from a country the customer never visits, and it follows a transaction in Belgium just 3 hours earlier. Add to that fact that the merchant sells electronic and the country has a high risk score, so the result becomes clear. The fraud probability is close to 100%. So this example was to show you how adding context turns flat data into insight. So feature engineering really transforms numbers into signal and signals into decision. Now jump to step 3. Let me warn you that we will have 7 steps. Once all these features are created, we must ensure that they are comparable in magnitude. I explain. Some variables, like transaction amounts, range from 1 to 10,000 euros, while others, like account ages, may go from 1 to 50 years. If we would leave this number in these ranges, the model will give too much weight to the largest number. That's why we have to normalize the data. In fact, we will scale each variable so that it expresses how far it is from the average. It is what we usually call a z-score. We will also encode categories in order to turn words such as countries or payment into numeric values. For example, Belgium will be 0, Brazil 1, Russia 2, mobile application will be labeled 1, and a car channel will be labeled 0. So at the end, all information speak the same mathematic language, meaning that no variable will dominate another. So that's now the full picture you see here, normalized. The raw data looks like this after all the cleaning process. We may jump to step 4, and now it's for the system time to explore and understand data, because before trusting a model, we must make sure the data makes sense. This phase is called the exploratory data analysis. In fact, it helps to discover relationships between variables and also validate the business assumption. For instance, we can check whether fraud is really linked to higher amounts or to nighttime operation or to foreign countries. And the best tool to visualize that is what is named a correlation heat map. It's a visual map where colors show how strongly two variables are connected. You'll see later that we have used it a lot in the CPH case. With the heat map, here the analyst may identify which features will actually help the model to detect fraud and which ones, on the opposite, might confuse it. So I show you here a concrete example of what the analysis of the sample revealed. This validation step ensures that the model learns from meaningful relationship and not from coincidence. A perfect correlation is scored 1, meaning really fully linked, while no correlation is scored 0, and a negative number is the opposite. It would mean a very few risk. For instance, here, there is a strong positive correlation between amounts and fraud, about 0.72, meaning that higher transaction amounts are much more likely to be fraudulent. Meanwhile, physical card and account age have negative correlation, showing that older accounts and in-person transactions are generally safer. Step 5. Now it's time to let the machine work and the algorithms to compete. By algorithm, I mean a systematic set of rules or procedures used by the machine to learn patterns from the data and make prediction or decision. How now will it choose the best algorithm? We'll see some metrics afterward, but here have a look on the way to choose it. In fact, instead of manually testing each model after another, we will use a commonly used tool, which is AutoML. AutoML stands for Automated Machine Learning. AutoML is a mostly used system that automatically tries multiple algorithms, typically like random forest, logistic regression, gradient boosting, deep learning, each algorithm with many different parameter settings. You may imagine that each model has its advantage and inconvenience. Random forest is robust and well handles outliers, while the logistic regressions, in fact, is fast. Gradient boosting is accurate on complex data. On each side, deep learning performs best on massive data sets like image recognition. Well, I won't for sure detail these algorithms now, but on the next slide, I'll briefly show you how, for instance, random forest, which is a classical one, how it works. Back to AutoML, once tested, AutoML will rank the tested algorithm by performance on our specific data. And at the end, we can choose not just the winner, but the one that best fits our needs with accuracy, with the nice speed processing and other criteria combined. Important to say that we can also select several algorithms and have an automated supervisor that would work with voting rights. But we'll see that later on. Have a look at one classical algorithm, which is random forest. At the very top, you have the data set. This is all the data, let's say 100 or 10,000 transactions, each labeled as fraud or normal. Now, instead of building one single giant decision tree, we're going to build hundreds of smaller different trees. And this team of trees is the forest. You can see them here as decision tree 1, decision tree 2, and so on all the way to tree n. And the magic part is to make sure the trees are different. And we'll do two random things. First, we don't give all the data to every tree. We only give each tree a random sample of transaction. And for each question in the tree, we only give a random sample of the features. For instance, one tree can only look at amount and time, and another can only look at country and merchant. We thus creates a kind of forest full of diverse, let's name them experts, that will vote and the majority will win. So by averaging the opinion of hundreds of diverse experts, we will get a final decision that's far more accurate and stable than just trusting one. All right, now we decide which model is or are the best. That's where metrics comes in. I'll go quickly through the main one. First is precision. If we raise, let's say, 100 alerts, how many of them are real frauds? In this example, 72 are real frauds, 28 are false positive. It's not bad. Recall is the opposite view. Out of 100 real frauds, how many did we detect? Here, that's 92. The break rate shows what percentage of all transactions are blocked to be reviewed. Here, it's 9%. You can immediately see the trade-off. More recalls mean more protection, but it also means more alerts and more work to achieve for manual checking. One usually say that the art of fraud detection is balancing these two. We'll see it later. The AUC, which stands for area under the curve, tells how well the model distinguishes fraud from normal cases. It goes from 0 to 1. 0.5 is random guessing, and 1 is perfect guessing. Our model reached here 0.96, which is really excellent. So I would say that a good model is not the model that catches everything, but is the model that catches what matters. Step 6 now is to massively train the selected model. Here we have chosen the best algorithm according to AutoML, and in this case, let's say it is a gradient boosting machine, GBM. How do we proceed? We will show the model hundreds or thousands or even millions of examples of both fraud and normal transaction so that it can learn patterns. Typically, once split the data set into two parts, 80% will be used for training and 20% will be used for testing after learning. This ensures that the model learns from one part and is evaluated on completely new data in order to prevent, let's say, an overfitting. GBM will build many small decision trees, each one improving on the mistakes of the previous one. Let's think at a team of investigators where each one reviews what the last one missed, and each rule refines the model's understanding. The more it trains, the better it becomes. It becomes able to distinguish between a normal payment and a suspicious one, but within a millisecond, and must be very fast. Here we see how the model actually learns. Each tree is like a set of yes-no questions that help the model to classify transaction as fraud or normal. For example, the tree may ask, was the transaction made at night? Was it from a usual country? Was the amount above a certain threshold? Does the behavior differ a lot from the customer's usual pattern? Each answer drives the model to a decision. And GBM builds hundreds of these small trees, each one correcting the mistake of the previous one. And at the end, by combining many small imperfect decisions, the model will achieve a high precision overall. Let's make it more concrete. Imagine a transaction of 2,500 euro made at 2 o'clock in the morning from Russia and 30 times higher than the customer's average. Each feature will send a strong positive signal, and the model learn to recognize this combination as very risky. In our case, it will assign a 94% probability of fraud. And what is important to understand is that the model does not memorize individual cases, but it only learns patterns. So that's how it becomes useful in real life. It works not by remembering, but it learns by reasoning. It's really fundamental. To make now the model perform at its best, one needs to fine-tune its internal settings, what we call the hyperparameters. Imagine that tuning hyperparameters is like adjusting the focus of your camera, not too sharp, but not too blurry. Just right, let's say for clear, but with reliable detection. This is an important step because it's where we adjust how fast and how deep the model learns. And once more, it's AutoML that automates it by testing many combinations and then select the best one. And in this example, for the final configuration, 500 trees have been implemented, each with 3 limited to a maximum depth of 8 level. And keep in mind that too many trees would cause the model to memorize, but too few would cause the model to miss patterns. The last step 7, now we have a trained model. We must verify that it performed well on unseen data. Remember, we kept aside 20% of transaction it has never seen before. And on this slide, you see the result in what we call the confusion matrix. The confusion matrix compares prediction with the reality. Out of our 10,000 test transactions, 460 were real frauds correctly detected. Those are true positives. 40 real frauds were missed. Okay, they are false negative. 180 normal transactions were incorrectly flagged as fraud. These are false positive. And more than 9,000 were correctly classified as normal. They are true negative. A quick look at the key metrics. The precision is 72, and this means that amongst all the transactions flagged as fraud were truly fraudulent. The rest were false alarms. Recall at 92%, that means that out of real frauds, the model successfully detected 92, but missed 8. Specificity is 98. It shows that the model is excellent in recognizing legitimate transaction, and accuracy, 97.8, meaning nearly all predictions were correct. To end with this example, I introduce now an important new metric, which is the F2 score. You see the definition. And that score is to measure how well the model identifies positive cases, but it's important, giving extra importance to capturing as many true positives as possible, even at the cost of generating more false alerts. You see the weight given to precision in the formula at the bottom of the slide. In other words, F2 measures how well the model detects fraud, but gives more importance to not missing real fraud cases, even if this leads to more false alerts. And F2 score will be used later to qualify the global CPH PoC satisfaction. Okay, now we have roughly covered the main principles. Let's move to part 2, the real case study conducted inside CPH Banque. When the PoC was conducted, the bank aimed to reduce the number of transactions that are today incorrectly blocked, was aimed to identify fraud more effectively, aimed to provide the compliance team with clearer tools to understand and to justify taken decision, and finally to set up a technical solution that would support a scalable system. Some statistic to start with. On this point, I insist on the fact that this slide is quite confidential. This is the situation observed the last 3.5 years at the bank. A mean of 1.38 fraudulent transactions a day was observed, which is not a lot. But on the other side, you see that it is more than 130 breaks a day. That's around 1% of them, each needing a manual check due to the scoring method used. I won't detail all the steps as I did before, but I'll mainly share with you the solution chosen and the results. The team conducted by Amit with amongst us today, the team has first chosen for a training sample, including 1,500 normal transactions and the same amount of fraudulent transactions. And this ratio 50-50, which is of course not the reality, but I hope you remember the reason for this approach. It was to a nice balance to train properly the system. You may see here the distribution of the normal transaction parameters. I insist what you see here are the normal transactions distribution. one can observe that most variables are highly skewed. For example, the variable instructed amount on the upper left shows that the vast majority of payments are small in value, while only a very few reach high amounts. Several features like payments products are concentrated in one or two dominant categories. In fact, this reflects a kind of stable and repetitive customer behavior. On the contrary, last device date shows a broad distribution, but nothing extreme, which is consistent with a mix of long-time and probably newer customers. The quest categories on the bottom are the feature engineering variables that I will comment later. This is now the heat map. In our case, AutoML, after a first train iteration, advised two different algorithms. I would qualify both well suited for data like payments. One based on random forests, and another use gradient boosting, the same as in the previous example. This first phase was, let's call it, our sandbox, a safe testing ground to observe the model's behavior before scaling up. The color you see indicates how important each variable was for prediction for each model. Down on the slide, you see red and orange areas that show variables that strongly influence the model's decision. And the blue areas mean that the variables contributes for little, even nothing in the prediction. And one can also observe that the creditor agent on the last line, which is a well-known bank identification code, and the BIC, this BIC is the more touchy parameter. And secondly, these two models smoothly react on many parameters and don't overreact to others. You may see the detailed results of the first full version with the two models. They have detected between 88 and 92% of fraudulent transactions, which are quite encouraging, but unfortunately, the models also flagged about 15% of normal transactions as fraud, which is much too high for daily use. It would be worse than manual. In other words, the recall of this version was good. We did catch most frauds, but the precision was too low. So as a first conclusion, this version proved us that AI, I mean machine learning, could be effective, but it also showed that we needed refinement to make the system more selective and better balanced. So the team decided to go for a second iteration, version 2, to improve both the data and the features. They first did expand the training data set from 1,500 normal transaction to 50,000, 50,000, in order first to help the model to better understand normal customer behavior, and second, also hoping to reduce false positives. And the team also added an advanced detection technique, which is a text similarity algorithm, which is rapid fuzz. What's rapid fuzz? Rapid fuzz is a tool that will act on this. Fraudster often modify the merchant name slightly to bypass control. For instance, a company name like TechWorld SPRL versus TechWorld SRL in two words, very similar as it's written here. A standard IT comparison tool would consider these names as different. With rapid fuzz, the machine, instead of checking for identical text, will measure how similar these two names are, even if few letters differs. And this will help to catch fraud patterns, especially in disguised transfers, a classical fraud techniques. In addition to these two improvements, another major upgrade in version 2 was methodology. We moved from the double model to a combined architecture called stacking. The idea of stacking is to use several different models, each model with its own strengths, and then at the final agent, let's name it a meta learner, that learns how to combine smartly their prediction. Imagine a team of experts. Amongst them, you have maybe a detective, an analyst, a psychologist, a data scientist, each one with different views and approach. Individually, each of them can make mistake, but together they will balance each other out. And on top of them, the meta learner will act as a conductor. And this approach, in our case, finally using 3-move model, gave more stable and more accurate prediction. Have a look at the new heat map to check correlation between variables and probability of fraud. In version 1, the picture was quite noisy, and the model reacted sometimes to weak or even to irrelevant signal. Here in version 2, you see much cleaner and obviously stronger clear zones. This means that the model has learned to focus on the truly predictive factors. I mean, high amounts, unusual countries, nighttime transaction, and behavioral deviations. And this improvement really did reduce false positive and speeded up fraud identification. If we compare version 1 and version 2 side by side with the same data set, 1 million now, it has been extended to 1 million historical transaction, meaning about 3 months transaction. You see that with version 1, the system broke and blocked around 74,000 catch fraud. You should admit that it's far too many alerts. With version 2, that numbers dropped to only 1,678 blocked transactions. And at the same time, the precision, remember, it's the number of true positive divided by the total of positive true and false. But this ratio jumped from 92% to nearly 99.8%, meaning that almost every generated alert was a true fault. You see that the recall rate slightly decreased from 83% to 79%, but the trade-off clearly worth it, meaning fewer interruption for customers and excellent detection coverage. And if we look at the you see that it's significantly improved. In short, I would say that V1 was a strong, between brackets, academic model, and that V2 is a practical industrial one, more selective, more reliable, and I would say well aligned to our needs. The next step was the recent development of version 3. Version 3 focused on refinement rather than radical changes, with the objective to reduce that time false negative, meaning to catch the few remaining frauds that still accept detection, while keeping precision extremely high at around 99.8%. And that should, of course, improve the F2 score, hopefully not too far from 100%. And to achieve this, several actions have been implemented. I will cover them shortly because I see time's running. A more advanced feature engineering, we added refined behavioral indicators such as available amount. We had a better version of rapid first. We added a review of the ambiguous transaction to improve label accuracy. We also experimented with larger data set to enhance learning of normal patterns. And a last one, in iteration 2, model gave a raw probability, for example, 0.83, meaning 83% chance of fraud. But this number is not always easy for operational teams to use. So it was converted into a risk score from 1 to 100. A low score means safe and a high score means risky. You see here the last metric evolution, but you see also that the price to pay is the significant increase of the block transaction. We acknowledge this transition from V2 to V3 implies a significant operational trade-off. Indeed, while we capture 7 additional frauds, we have generated nearly 4,000 additional breaks. That's much better than the manual score, but it's much more than V2. This is for sure a deliberate strategic decision, but taken by the bank, let's say to prioritize higher fraud capture by recalls and also tolerate the associated cost for manual reviews and maybe higher customer friction, of course. So the bank is consciously willing to pay the higher operational price in order to let significantly fewer frauds pass through. After refinement of version 3, the final stage will be, I say will be, not today, will be version 4, name it industrialization, where the project moves from experiment to a real-world operation. And this process will include several steps. First, to deliver a pre-report to validate the business case with all our stakeholders. An additional remaining or retraining, of the model on the full and clean data set for robustness. And finally, integrating the AI model directly into the real-time payment system of the bank. And this last step is for sure the most critical because it's where the model must perform in milliseconds and without mistakes. I think we may say that AI could progressively become part of the bank organization. To end this presentation, a few words about the actual time cost of the PoC. You can see here the sequence, specification and kickoff, the modeling iterations, data extraction and audit, transformation, training, and the final evaluation. In fact, according to me, I think this is not really CapEx nor OpEx if you are well advised. It was the case of Banque. All right. Then before ending, I would like to remind you that fraudsters adapt at huge speed. As soon as a hole is closed or a security layer is strengthened, fraudster will quickly find new ways to bypass your controls. And it's, let's name it, a technological cat and mouse game. Of course, they are using the same tools as we do. They are using AI as well. They do it to design attacks more and more sophisticated and automated, and then, of course, cheap. But remember that there is one major advantage on our side. We own the large and historical data sets needed to train powerful detection or just don't. So that ends my story. I hope this was clear enough and not too boring for the specialist. I'd be, of course, more than happy with Amit to answer your questions. And for those who are interested about the tools we have used, I joined as an appendix to the slide deck the libraries we have used, and you'll get a copy of that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pierre.
Thank you.
It was
very interesting. Thank you for that. Bye.
Thank you. Do you have questions? I already see a hand raised, so please, Andreas, you can ask your question.
Hi, I'm Andreas from Austria, Vienna, from a bank, and I'd like to ask a question regarding slide 29, when you've been talking about parameters and advanced name detection. I guess you used or you've been training this model before the verification of PE, and I'd like to ask you or I'd like to hear your opinion how important this is now after verification. Hence, the client is informed and can decide himself if he make a transaction or not.
This is a question for Amit because it's operational. Amit, you can ask the question.
Yes, I try to do it. So maybe can you repeat, please, more specifically your question, please, about the possibility to the client to accept or refuse an operation? Is that?
Yeah, that's what I understood.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So clients are not that they don't know our tools, our own rules. So they don't decide what it is possible to do or not. So we are major decided to reject or accept an operation. So AI today is an assessment tool. The final decision will always be made by a human. So we have to decide if an operation will be accept or reject, and AI will also evaluate the operation and make an estimate to exposure to the fraud risk on a scale from 0 to 10. So it's for the moment only an indicator for the AML teams. But the client do not have the possibility to ask for making an operation or not. Sorry for my English.
Yeah. No. Should we work as described? We should give information to the fraudster, which is not the purpose, of course.
Could you repeat,
did we answer your question?
I kind of have a new question building on the answer now. Does AI and all the training tools, this data, does it include that we involve regulation into the samples, the testings?
What do you mean by that? Have you an example to give?
Let's stick to the verification of P. When there is new regulation that we need to implement, does those models know that the samples have to be changed, that the rules have to be changed?
Probably. Okay, the system is very flexible, so we should retrain the system every time a regulator will introduce new rules, and that's for sure. That the principle of machine learning, we should be flexible and adapt the system and retrain it regularly on new data, new transaction, new rules.
Yes, it's important to recall that is the machine learning was trained based on CPH's own experience in analyzing a transaction. So we fed the machine learning model by highly relevant data, which made the tool very effective. So it works with the highly data that we have give to the machine learning. So it's our own experience of exception or rejecting operations. So it's a tool specifically made by CPH's own experience. And it's important. I think that it will be said.
So last question, I'm already satisfied, but just to have comparable data, on what frequency do you train your systems and refresh it?
It's still a PoC, so it's not operational yet.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We would be, do not hesitate if you want us to share data and experience in detail with you. We are ready to do so.
So AI serves nowadays has an assessment tool. I repeat, the final decision will be always made by a human. And I think that it's important for the moment to understand that it's a decision support tool. It's not the machine they use and to allow to accept by himself the operation of not. It's just an indicator for the moment of an exposure to fraud risk or not. Maybe in the future we are considering extending the AI to the post-transaction monitoring of clients. But yes, it's the next step.
Other questions? Either it was boring, either it was very clear.
Yes, don't hesitate to write the questions also on the chat if you think it's easier. Indeed, as Pierre said. Yes, go ahead, Pierre, please.
Yes, you can give my email address to all the participants of the call, and I'll be very pleased to answer the question personally if you want to.
For that, it's true that we can also wonder about the next steps, right? And the milestones that you will have for the next phase. As you said in the conclusion, it's a cat and mouse game, but of course you hold the history and the relationship with your members. So I think that is very important to keep in mind also with the bank's compliance on our GDPR, right? So also to reassure you and your client that you are all along the steps with them. I'm not talking personally on the technicity that we learned today, but also about how you reassure your customers and clients and how you keep reactivating yourself as a bank. So I thought it's very interesting because I see that there's future developments, right?
You have been interrupted for the last sentence.
No, I think that because of the constant acquisition system, there will be new milestones, new challenges, and there's a lot to do with a constant improvement. So it requires also a lot of energy to keep reassuring customers and members, but also keep updating yourself. So it's a very challenging topic to be recurrent, to remain recurrent. So indeed, maybe our connections are a little bit fragile today. So what we can do, agree, we will close this session for today, and we will share the presentation and Pierre's email to continue the discussions and development in the future. So once again, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
You.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.